So, leadership lesson number 2. The truth about what others think of you. So this one I learned the hard way, for sure. So let's begin with the vision. This is what we think, that we're going to be great leaders, and we're going to be the ones who have figured out how to be the boss that everybody celebrates and loves. We're going to do it right because we've watched tons of bosses do it wrong, and we've learned what not to do, and we're going to come in and we're going to do it differently. And I buy that. So we're going to be beloved. We're going to be the best supervisor ever, and we're going to be celebrated. Right? And then we get the job. We move up in our companies, or we get a job where we're supervising people, and we realize all of a sudden, it hits us one day, that we're not very popular. Right? It's a harsh reality. It's not what we think, especially in the nonprofit sector. So this is what great leaders know, is that great leaders aren't always liked very much. Sometimes they are, and certainly by some people. This is not an absolute. But they will not be liked if they're doing their jobs by everybody in the way perhaps they were before. So what happened? We're going to talk about that. What happened was we did what we said we did when we got the job, because we said we were going to make changes for our organization or our company. And what did that entail? Well, that entailed we created change. And I think especially in the nonprofit sector, we know change is not comfortable nor popular for nonprofits. We love our nonprofits. I love the nonprofit sector. I loved my nonprofit. So we believe passionately in everything. But when we have to make a change, we have to make a change. And we have to make hard decisions. So we made tough decisions. Perhaps we had a budget issue and we had to make some choices among programs or among what we were doing with our staff. And we held people accountable, which especially in the nonprofit sector is very, very tough. Why? Because we love our nonprofits. We love our nonprofits. And so I do this whole session called How to Be a Good Bad Guy. In the nonprofit sector, that's very hard. I used to say when I was the executive director at CAP, whether we were changing the mission statement or the timesheet format, there were tears. And that is true. Right? Why? Because people love their nonprofits. And they love their day-to-day. So when you do that, all of a sudden, you're not very popular. We do what we believe is right for our organization, and sometimes we make mistakes. And all of a sudden we find out that our staff or our volunteers or our stakeholders don't like us as much as perhaps they did before. And that is a harsh truth. That is why we call this tough truths. But that is the truth. If we are not liked as much as we used to be, we tend to get very hurt because it hurts us, because we love our nonprofit too, and it's hurtful. But at the same time, I say to people, I used to do a lot of coaching, and I used to say, if you are not the most popular person in the room, you're probably doing something right, because you've made a hard decision that isn't popular. But that's what's going to make your organization grow. So take heart. It's not all bad. That you're a good person doing critical work. That's what I had to remember. Because what I found, and I'm going to go into this in a second, is I went from being fairly popular to being pretty unpopular fairly quickly. So you're still a good person doing critical work. I used to have to tell myself that every day. Right? And some people inside will get you and still love you. So it's not an absolute. And lots of people on the outside will still love you. And that's why the most important thing you can do as you move up, or as you perhaps go from being online staff to supervising a few people to leadership positions, to really have a strong system of support outside. Because you're not going to get it inside, nor is it especially appropriate to go to your inside people and ask them if you're still a good person every day. That's not what you want to do. It doesn't show strength. And it's putting them in an awkward position because maybe they don't think you are. Maybe you just cut a program because you lost funding or because you had to, and someone might lose their job, and you might not be popular at all right then. And it's a bad feeling. And that's when you call your person, whoever that is outside, and you say, please love me. Please tell me that my mother's great like that, and my husband is too. My mother's the kind of person I could say, that somebody could say to her, Deirdre just went and robbed a bank, and now she's in prison, and my mother would say, I'm sure she had her reasons. So no matter what I did at CAP, or what I've done as a board member, what I've done in committees, I always knew I could count on that. So that was always good. So for great leaders, you have to know that you're doing good work, and that has to be good enough. And I'll just tell you quickly, this executive director was me. Anybody who's moved up into a role of an executive director, anybody who's been an executive director or supervised in the nonprofit sector, or even sat on a board, you know some of this stuff. Chances are you've lived some of this stuff. I moved up within CAP. I was working as line staff doing marketing, then became the director of marketing, then became the executive director. Each step along the way, I grew less popular. Less people wanted to have lunch with me. And by the end, I found people were whispering behind their doors about me, or perhaps going to my board about me when I would make a hard decision. Would accuse me of all kinds of things. Had a few times where somebody went to a reporter. Why? Because I was making decisions that weren't always popular. And it felt terrible, and I would sit there and I'd say, I remember coming out one day and seeing that everybody had gone to lunch. We all used to sign out together. And I was the only one left. And I remembered that's what I'm here for. That I shouldn't be going out and doing all kinds of this. I need to be doing my job, and I need to rely on outside support for that. And that's okay, and lots of people still love me. But that's a tough truth. Okay, moving on. Leadership lesson number 3. The truth about your stories. I love this one because this is one I still work on a lot. So think of that guy. You know the one, the guy or the girl, and you're going to see them today, you're going to see them at lunch, who know just how to engage people so well, and they make it look so easy. And you sit with them and you watch them and you say, how do they do that so well? How are they able to get people and charm people? And then we say things like, well, they're phony, and no, they know what they're doing, and they're building relationships. So they make it look easy, they can do anything, people love him, and it drives the rest of us crazy. We're like, how does he do that? How does he do that? It's this guy, right? How does he do that? Well, here's how he does it. He knows the tough truth, and this one's a little tough. It stings a teeny bit, so just brace yourself, but this is the truth. The tough truth is nobody's going to find you as interesting as you do. Right? Everybody good? Okay. So it's the truth. Sure, we have interesting stories. And we like to engage with others. And we like to tell people about what happened today. We want to do that. We want to share. And we should, because that makes people feel like they've gotten to know us a little bit better. So we engage others. We share a bit. We talk about our lives. But here's what great leaders do. And here's what I continue to practice every single day. They know other people aren't going to care about every single detail of their traffic jam on the way to whatever meeting they went to. They know other people are not going to care about every single point in their child's Little League game from Saturday, or the little fight that they had. And HOAs, anybody ever been on a homeowners association board, can I ask? Those are nutty. So if you lived in a condo of any kind and you're on a board there, they're just crazy. There's all kinds of crazy making and arguments, or any kind of board you're on, any kind of battle, your fight with your sister. We love to tell people that stuff and go through just start to finish everything that happened, and we love to do that, and sometimes people will do it to us, and we'll even, do this thing and look at our watch and try to show, and they don't pay attention. They don't pay attention. But what great leaders know is that they might have something interesting to share, but nobody's going to care about their lives as much as they do. Why? We love our lives. We're in our lives. We're in our lives day to day. She just talked about my bodybuilding. You heard everything you need to know about my bodybuilding. Nobody's going to care about every rep I do or every set. Nobody's going to care about how I spent every single minute of my day at CAP. That's why I cut my book by 100 pages before I published it. Because I knew as much as I loved my story, nobody was going to care about it as much as I did. And that's the truth. It's the truth. And that's not to say we don't care about each other, we don't have interesting things to say, but nobody's going to love what we have to say as much as we do. So we get to the good stuff and we leave out the rest. We keep it short. We engage, we get to the big nugget, maybe share a detail or two, and then we move on and engage the other person. That's the big trick. We think that we can share and engage and get a level deeper by telling them all about us. That's not the way great leaders do it. Great leaders tell you enough to make you feel like they know something, like they're not hiding anything, which is not what you want to do. But then they focus on the other person. They ask great questions. They know how to engage. They don't just say, what is it that you do? But then they say, is that always what you thought you'd do? What other careers have you had? Most of us have had, what was your favorite? I was a waitress. I was a news producer. I worked in all kinds of places before I started my company. So what other jobs have you had? Where else have you lived? How many kids do you have? What's it like having one kid? What's it like having one of each kid? A boy and a girl. They know how to take a good question and ask another question and make that person feel like they are just fascinating, which they are. If you do it right and you get great answers, you're going to find out a lot about people and engage. You want to honor boundaries, and you want to stick a little clear of religion and politics unless you're pretty sure you're on that's an okay ground. But they know how to ask great questions. They keep great eye contact. They watch nonverbals. The second I'm talking to someone and they do this, whether it's in a meeting or whether I'm just sitting there casually with them, I either say, I'm going to finish this up, I promise, or if we're in a meeting, I'll say, you know what, I want to honor your time. I watch those nonverbals diligently, because those nonverbals mean more than anything anybody would ever say. And great leaders do this, they turn off their tech. So what we don't want to do is meet with somebody, whether it's a funder, whether it's a coworker, whether it's our boss, or whether it's our staff, and have our iPhone there. Here's what I know. When I get a new email on my iPhone and it lights up, I get a dopamine shot, because I feel important and I want to know who wants me and wants to tell me something important. So I know that I am not able to push that away and not look and not look. And so I keep my phone in my bag. Or if I'm waiting for a call, I flip it over. Because I want to keep eye contact with someone, and I want them to know I think they're important. Great leaders know how to make someone feel like the most important person in the room, and they treat them like they are. And people love great leaders for it, because it's special. Not because we're doing anything wrong if we're looking at our phones, or we're talking and we're doing this, and talking and doing this. When we think, by the way, people know what you're doing. If you're sitting there talking and you think you're doing it under the table and nobody's on to you, we're all on to you. We know that, because we all do it. Right? But what makes great leaders special is that they don't, which makes them stand out, which makes the person feel like the most important person in the room, which is what we want, because that's how we engage, and we get good politics, and we get a level deeper, and eventually we get more things we want in life. So they get what they want with those politics, and the rest of us don't quite understand how that worked. So I'll tell you just another story. I belong to Rotary in San Diego. I didn't even know really much about Rotary while I was living here, but in San Diego, Rotary is a really big deal, and I belong to this big club. It's the one the mayor belongs to, and every Thursday is my training ground at noon to practice my own tough truths and to practice cutting my own stuff short. I have this rule, I call it the 1/3 rule, and it's everything I say and everything I write and everything I email will be better if I cut it by 1/3, at least. And so I do that when I talk, and I read back my emails, and I'll cut them. If I want people to read my stuff, I cut it. But when I'm sitting there engaging people and telling stories, I cut everything by 1/3. That's what I did with my book. I can do a tweet in 120 characters. I don't need 140, because I know people don't have time, and they're not going to care about as much of what I say as I do. So I keep it short. So every Thursday I get to go and do this, and I started engaging this one guy who I didn't really know. I had just started out with the club and practiced this technique, and realized how much better and easier it is to engage with people when you ask them great questions and you don't talk about yourself, and how special they feel. And it's authentic. It's great. And so I started engaging him. It took once or twice. I remembered him the second time I saw him. That was it. We became fast friends. And I write this blog, as they said, Rebecca said in my introduction. And I wrote this one blog about this woman I saw at a Starbucks, who was doing this incredible job. She was a manager at Starbucks, gave great customer service. So I wrote a blog about it. And when I released it, this guy, David, who I met in Rotary, loved it and sent it out to all of his networks. And it made its way to Seattle. And Howard Schultz, the CEO, read my blog. Oh, yeah. Very exciting. And actually called her and congratulated her for creating a first-class experience. And then when I told David that, he called his contact at Fox News, and they did a story on it. I didn't even ask him to do that. He didn't even tell me he was doing that. Why did he do that? Because he liked me, because we were engaged in a good way, engaged in a good way. We'd gone a level deeper, because I'd asked him great questions and engaged him. I didn't even ask him to do any of that. So that's what happens when you engage people and get a level deeper. People will be there for you and help you get what you want. And we will do the same for others. It's very natural. So that's just one example of something I was able to get in life. And there's nothing wrong with getting things in life. By being authentic and having great relationships and knowing how to engage people and knowing the truth about my stories. And it's a hard truth. We don't always like it, but that's okay. Because I'm here to tell you. And then we'll go and we'll practice. The thing I always love is when I speak at things like this, now you can practice engaging in the question asking thing for the rest of the day at lunch. People, though, will come up to me. Don't feel like you have to ask me a great question when this is over, because people will come and ask me a question. They'll try to formulate it in a really open-ended way. You don't have to do that. You can just ask me a question.